let's go for a decapitation. You ready? Shing! Look at that! Ha! Give me a kiss. Mwah! Mwah!
Alright, hands off.
I was just caressing you, my friend. The fact you have cat ears makes me think you're mentally unstable. Look at that! Oh, look at this! Look at this! We got 2 of them. Look at this! Oh, give me a kiss. Mwah! Give me a kiss. Mwah! Give me a Stop looking at me, motherfucker. Where were you on the 13th? Spooky. Give me my shit. I need it. Huh? Say What are you, some kind of Kuma? What are you, some kind of anime fan? What are you doing with those cat ears, man? You look ridiculous. We should probably head north, check out the Commonwealth. I hear it's pretty nice. I also hear Nebraska's nice.
I hear Nebraska's nice.
Oh shit! Oh shit! Oh shit! What is happening? Oh my god! Why were they... Dude, what the hell is going on? Look at this.
What's going on, everybody? It's your boy Shooky from Shook Earth Media, and today we're talking about The Walking Dead Saints and Sinners Chapter 2 Retribution. I finally beat the game and I'm ready to review it. It came out about a month ago for PC and that's how I played it on my computer, so I'm really excited to break it down with you guys. So this game, the previous game, was one of my favorite virtual reality games of all time. I bought my VR headset just to play that and Half-Life Alyx, and between those two games, the $400 headset was worth it just for those two games. Absolutely. Just as a Walking Dead fan, of course, I really love Saints and Sinners, but it's also a great VR game in its own right, so you don't have to be a Walking Dead fan to really appreciate this game. So I was a huge fan of the previous one, and now we have a sequel that, to me, honestly, it feels more like glorified DLC because it's really just building on what there was previously, adding some new features to it, and adding a whole new action-focused tone to the game that I think really fundamentally changes how this game feels and plays. But keep in mind that it does feel more like an extension of the previous game than a brand new sequel fully created. So that's one thing that you need to know about it, but I loved every second of this, and I think we'll get into why. So this game, it's a survival crafting game. You go out, you have a home base, and then you go out into each of the 12 or so maps, and then you gather all the resources, you look for recipes for things to craft, and then you bring them back to your home base and you make new weapons. So that's the name of the game. It's just gathering resources, fighting off enemies, sneaking around, and then gathering all the things you need and crafting new weapons out of it. So it's a constant cycle of just creating new ammo, new weapons, and you need to gather resources and all of that. This game, it does actually let you import your save from the previous game, and none of the story choices carry over. We'll get back to the story later, but all of your items in your inventory will be carried over. So that's a huge help at the beginning of the game. And like I said, this game has a new action-oriented focus. It drops you right into a mission where you are being swarmed by a ton of zombies. You got weapons right there, and all of a sudden you're being swarmed. You've never seen as many enemies on screen at once as you do in the first mission of this game. So it really gives you that impression right away that this is a new experience because of how many enemies there are chasing you at all times. It really changes the whole strategy and dynamic of the game. You have to carry explosives and lure items on you at any given time, explosives to deal with a swarm of enemies coming at you, and lure items to draw them away from you so you can sneak past. You need to have these items on you at all times because there are just so many more zombies on screen at any given moment that you can't really afford to go without it. So that creates a whole new dynamic. There were explosives in the previous game. I almost never used them because you can get away with just using guns and taking them out one by one. In this game, not so much. You won't be relying on your melee weapons as much as I did in the previous game, simply because there are too many to take out at once. You need to take them out quicker than a swing of the sword. So it really has a whole new dynamic for that reason. And this game, it has a lot of game mechanics, you know, and that's one thing I really like about it. You can climb up on various buildings, and you can also grab enemies and throw them back. That's one thing I really use. Like if I need a second to reload and enemies are coming at me, I grab one zombie, throw it into the other zombies, they stumble for a second, and then I can reload. So that's really why this game feels so great and why it's so important to play it in VR. You can, of course, open up drawers, and it's a really interactive environment, and that's part of what makes it so engaging and so fun. And I get really goofy in VR games. I have a very playful mindset.
Give me a kiss. Mwah! Give me a kiss. Mwah!
But you'll have a good time with this, you know. It's a very fun time in VR, and really, the thing about VR that's so amazing is the scale of everything. It really feels like it's out in front of you as opposed to a small, tiny on a screen. You know, the enemies are sometimes taller than you, and that really, it changes the whole dynamic of how the game feels. But the other big addition, in addition to the action-oriented focus of this one, is you can explore at nighttime. So there are only 3 new maps in this game, but by adding nighttime, there's a nighttime version of every single map. So it almost feels like a new map at night. And they add the mechanic that there are some new resource types. Every item you collect has various components that when you break it down in the recycle bin at your home base, you can craft those components into something new. There are new components like biomass, phosphorus, protein. No, protein was in the old one. There's leather, plastic. There's new components for the new items that are in the game as well. There's new weapons and stuff that you can craft. And you need to go out at night to collect these nighttime exclusive items so that you can craft the new weapons. I think it really makes for an interesting mechanic. And I really love the nighttime because it makes it a lot scarier. It feels like a horror game now, whereas before, it really, I would say that the old game, it wasn't spooky to me. As much as I enjoyed it, it wasn't a horror game. Walking Dead's not really a horror franchise to me. I mean, it is in terms of the creatures and the setting, but it's not trying to scare you. This game absolutely does, because you'll be walking around in the dark and all of a sudden there's a zombie growling in your ear and you freak out. So I love the nighttime exploration, and the UV light on your flashlight that you can use to collect those nighttime exclusive weapons makes for an interesting dynamic. So I love the nighttime edition. It makes a whole, between the action-oriented focus and exploring at night, even though that there aren't many new maps in this game, there are only 3 new ones, it feels like a whole new experience just with those 2 features alone. So I think those in and of themselves are a good argument for why this game is good, despite the fact that, in my opinion, it's more like glorified DLC and extension of the previous game. So I mentioned that there are new weapons as well. So we have a previous arsenal, the whole arsenal from the previous game is all in this game as well. As I said, you can import your inventory. All your weapons from the previous game will carry over. One note on that is it's not as intuitive as it could be. You have to boot up the previous game, and then it generates a code for you, and then you put the code into the new game. Something tells me that that means it's happening on the server side, so you basically upload your, I can't say this for a fact, but you basically upload your game save to a server from the game developers, and then you're loading from the server in the new game, as opposed to just simply loading in your save from your hard drive or SSD, as in my case. But that doesn't seem to be an option for whatever reason, but it still works out. It's just, if you're just booting it up for the first time, just know you will have to boot up the original game to carry your save over. Like I said, there are new weapons, and some of them are really awesome. The chainsaw, really satisfying. It's really great to mow down a horde of enemies. There are new explosive weapons. You got a grenade launcher, which to me was a bit disappointing because it's not as good as the explosive arrows for the bow and arrow weapons, which there are in this game as well. There's a new bow and arrow as well that I really liked using. But the bow and arrow explosives are better than the grenade launcher, which is a bit disappointing, but it's still fun to have a new explosive weapon. There are also grenades, hand grenades. You pull the pin and throw it. That's satisfying to use. There are flares that you can use as a lure to draw a horde of zombies away from you at nighttime exclusively, pretty much. So that's a great addition as well. It makes for another strategy you can use at nighttime to try to lure the enemies away and sneak past, which stealth is not really as much an option in this game because of the more action-oriented focus, but at nighttime you do have the opportunity to do that. The other big addition as far as weapons, you got one-handed shotguns and a one-handed machine gun weapon. The one-handed shotgun, the base version, there's a base version and then an upgraded version of both of these. The base version of the one-handed shotgun was a bit disappointing because it really does not have much durability at all, and the weapons break. That's one feature of this game, is your weapons will always break, they jam. I think that makes for a great survival experience, especially in a post-apocalyptic world like this, and it forces you to have to craft new weapons all the time. So I think it's a really important mechanic, but the one-handed shotgun breaks really, really fast. So while it is, of course, an advantage, the two-handed shotgun, which you can only store one two-handed weapon over your shoulder here, whereas you can store two one-handed weapons at your hips. So it makes for quick access to pull out a one-handed weapon as opposed to a two-handed weapon. But the upgraded version of the one-handed shotgun is a little bit better in terms of durability, but just know that there are downsides to some of these new weapons. They're not inherently just better than the old weapons, because there is a balancing act going on, balancing the old weapons with the new. So I do like the new weapons that there are, but just know that it's not a panacea, to use a fun word, that will cure all your problems. You want to use a lot of weapons from the original game as well. I'm not a fan of the one-handed SMG at all. It was a big disappointment because of how inaccurate it is, and it doesn't do much damage to begin with. While it is very durable, it won't break very easily, and it has a specific ammo type that's specific to only that gun, so it's not really my favorite. There's also a safari gun, and I didn't really use this much because, like the bolt action rifle in the original game, you have to cock it back every time you use it. However, it does work at a long distance, and it does the most damage of any gun in the game, so that is an option as well. I didn't end up using it very much, but some people might enjoy that. The game also adds a new melee weapon that are gloves you wear on your hands. Sounds like a super cool concept. You can punch zombies and humans without even dropping your gun, which is a really cool aspect. However, it takes 2 punches at least to kill just a standard zombie, and I always ended up getting grabbed and getting damage taken. So it didn't end up being worthwhile to me to actually use. While the aesthetics are cool, I'm not so sure that, maybe I'm just using it wrong, but I didn't end up liking the weapon all that much. Yeah, for those who never played the first game, one thing that really feels great with these weapons is the fact that there is like recoil and weight to the weapons. It's kind of hard to explain until you use it, but basically you have to use 2 guns or 2 hands for your guns, or else, the recoil like flies back and it takes a second to reset to where your hands are in real life. So that in that way, it's really interesting that, even though you're only holding 2 controllers, you still have the sensation of weight, because sometimes a heavy item that you're carrying your hands will be lower in the game than they are in real life. So I think that it's a really interesting mechanic that works very well. There is still the problem from the first game where two-handed melee weapons are very cumbersome to use. There is one new one, a sword that you can use. Weirdly, I don't think you can craft it, but there is a sword in the game. That's a really cool two-handed weapon. Of course, it makes you feel like Michonne, so that's really cool. But other than that, two-handed melee weapons is not really my favorite thing. I was always using this one-handed weapon from the first game where you can actually decapitate zombies with it. So that's a lot of fun. Just know that the two-handed melee weapons are still not the greatest in this game. They don't really do anything to fix that. Now let's go into the story of the game. So it picks up where the last one left off. The first one introduced the New Orleans setting, which is where this one takes place as well, of course. There's a new faction in addition to a returning faction from the first game called the Tower. In the first game, the Tower was always portrayed as oppressive, we never really got to see evidence of that happening. We just kind of had to take their word that they are oppressive authoritarian types. This game does a lot to really establish what they were doing that's so bad that you see them executing people in the opening cutscene, which the opening cutscene is pretty much a direct rip from the first game, but with a new kind of spooky, nightmarish tone to it. So it was pretty cool to see like zombies rising up out of the water as your boat was riding through, going towards the tower. So it was a cool opening cutscene. But a great thing about this one is we actually get to see inside the tower. The game builds up to this big tower siege, and the tower of the villains of this game. So I think it was great that we actually get to see a little bit more of the tower firsthand. The other faction that was the opposing faction to the tower in the first game, they were kind of evil and stuff as well. So I didn't really pick a side in the conflict in the first game. But in this one, they got rid of that faction. That faction was wiped out, and now there's a new faction that's called the Exiles, which are pretty much tower people who want to rebel against the leadership. So that is pretty much the thrust of the story, is there are people inside the tower that want to rebel against it. They need your help to do that, and you can choose to help them out or kill them. So one thing about the game is that, yes, you can import all of your items from the previous game. None of your choices in the first game have any impact. And that's one thing that I criticized the first game for, was the saints and sinners aspect. You can be a good person or you can be a bad person. And to me, that kind of falls flat because they're even less than like a Telltale video game, where a lot of people criticize Telltale video games because, oh, your choices don't matter. You know, it's just a couple dialogue changes and then you'll see a slight difference in a cutscene. This game is even less than that. So basically, your choices boil down to, you can either help people or you can kill them when you encounter them. So the choices kind of fall flat. And when you're given the option to kill a character, pretty much the only thing that you gain from not killing them is maybe you'll see them in a cutscene later. Or not a cutscene, but you'll just see them out in the environment later. So it really didn't feel like your choices mattered that much, in my opinion. So that's the Saints and Sinners aspect falls flat. But I will praise this game for learning from the previous one, where the previous game had a lot of the story told to you over the radio, because you're talking with this character who's in this thing called the Reserve, and it's like a hidden underground facility with a bunch of resources, and he's hidden in there. You spend a lot of the game talking to this character, but you don't get to see him until the end. So it really felt like you're disembodied from the story. A lot of the major story beats happened off screen, and then you see the aftermath of these story beats. That was not necessarily the best way to tell the story, because with VR, you're present, you're in the moment. You want to see stuff happening in front of you. You don't want to hear about it in dialogue later. It just doesn't feel like an engaging story. This game learns from that. This sequel learned from that. You never have a conversation over the radio. You only ever see them face to face. And there are cinematic things that happen in the game itself. So it's really cool to see. One of the best missions toward the end is you're basically traveling up to meet this big bad, and there's a boss battle and everything. But you're traveling through these underground tunnels, and you're walking through, and all of a sudden the floor collapses under you, and you're surrounded by zombies, and it's dark and scary. And that was so amazing, going through those tunnels, dealing with these traps where hordes of zombies are coming at you. It was amazing cinematic glory. I absolutely loved every second of that mission. And even the boss battle itself, it was really exciting. We'll get into that a little bit later, but I really love to see that cinematic style of storytelling. And they only really had 2 missions that were like that. Most of the missions were like the previous game, where you have a person you talk to on a map, and then they tell you to get something, and then you go back to them. And that's fine in terms of mission structure. I just really enjoyed the linear style of missions, and I almost wish that they leaned into that a bit more. But that kind of is at odds with the survival style of gameplay. So I can understand why they didn't, but my favorite missions were the linear cinematic missions, you know? Like that tunnel it's so spooky, and it was right after you're going down this creepy elevator, and just the intensity, the heart palpitations. I was going nuts. It was so fun. The other side of the story picks up from the previous game. There's a character you're trying to help called May, who wanted to escape the tower. May ended up dying. No matter what you did, she ends up dead in this sequel. So, you know, whether you left her alive in the original or not, she ends up dead in this one. And her husband is now a character in this game, and he blames you for her death, no matter if you killed her or not. And the funny thing is, the game doesn't even reference for sure whether you killed her or not. I'm pretty sure the save I imported was my second playthrough, and on my second playthrough, I pretty much killed everybody, just because I did the good side playthrough first, and then I do the evil side. So I imported a save where I actually did kill her, and it treated me like I could have dialogue options where I didn't. And I don't think the game really has an opinion on whether or not I actually did it or not. I had trouble even remembering if I did. So like I said, your choices from the previous one don't matter, and your choices in this one also don't really matter. But one of the characters in the game, the most standout character, he's on the cover. You see him in a lot of the marketing material for this one. He's got a suit of armor. He's this hulking figure with armor that can't be penetrated with bullets. So it's an intimidating figure, and there's a really cool part where he corners you inside a recording studio you need to get an item from. He corners you in there, and he's toying with you this whole game. So he's chasing you down. He's a great character. Voice actor is really good. The voice acting is good overall. I really enjoyed this character, and you see hints of him throughout many of the missions. He's stalking you. He's toying with you. There's one part of the game where you're being chased by a swarm of zombies, crazy swarm. You get to the little skiff that you had that you had take you into this area, and he set it on fire. That's one example. There are other examples, but I don't want to spoil anything because that's one of the best parts of the game is this character. So I really enjoyed that part of the story. However, I do feel like they didn't quite capitalize on him as much as they could have. When I heard about this character, I was like, oh, great. We got Mr. X in The Walking Dead. And who Mr. X is from Resident Evil. If you haven't played Resident Evil, he's the guy you can't kill. So he just stalks you through various environments. You can outrun him, but that's pretty much it. You can't take him down through traditional means. I thought this would be amazing to have this thrown into the survival gameplay. All of a sudden, you're on your merry way on a mission. He starts chasing you, and it changes up this whole dynamic. It makes the zombies a lot scarier. You didn't encounter him in a combat sense until the boss battle that they have with him, which I enjoyed the boss battle. And once you finally get to that boss battle, and you're like, oh man, being chased by this guy carrying an axe that I can't like just shoot at. It's like, it's like, I love being chased in horror games, you know, like Resident Evil 7 and stuff like that. And Amnesia, just that feeling of being chased by an enemy you can't kill is really, there's nothing like it. It's really a thrill. They didn't really use that in this game too much. While I love the character and the concept, I feel like there could have been a gameplay side of it as well that there wasn't, unfortunately. So I did enjoy the boss battle. It was unique. You had to actually scrap items and craft explosives on the fly, so that was pretty cool. But other than that, I feel like they could have used the character more. He was my favorite part of the story in this game, and I feel like it wasn't utilized very well. The rest of the characters in this game are fairly forgettable. Most of them you encounter once and then don't encounter them again once or twice. There's like a priest character who's leading a group, and he's trying to create this trade network of people cooperating against the tower. And basically he ends up, minor spoiler alert I suppose, you encounter him later in the game. You encounter him in the first mission, and then you encounter him later in the game. And later in the game he's like, oh, all my people got killed by the tower, and I hid away in this secret place.
What is going on? I'm sorry, bro. You're drunk as hell. You had a little bit too much of that sacrificial wine, my guy.
And I suppose it might be supposed to be a reference to Gabriel from The Walking Dead, but it just feels a little repetitive at this point, because we already had a cowardly priest character whose people died and all that, and you know, honestly, it just wasn't really that satisfying. And then he asks you to kill him, And I'll throw in a clip here, but I even said when it happened, I was like, dude, he's saying he wants me to kill him so he can go to eternal life, but in his religion, it's a sin to do that. So you would go to hell for it. It just doesn't. It just very clearly wasn't written by somebody who knew much about the theology, which is fine, but it just feels like I was trying to send a message, I suppose.
No, it's a sin in the religion to kill yourself. So eternal life is going to be in hell if you're doing that. I got this for you. It's the Bible. I think you might want to read it. Here.
Although, if you don't kill him, he comes back in the final mission, and he's leading a group of rebels. So that was cool to see. I like to see him at the end. But other than that, like there's a character called Whisper. She's forgettable. She's just somebody who's supposed to get you an explosive, the grenade launcher specifically, and that's pretty much it. And that was okay, but I didn't really care about that character at all. There's also a character named the Pawn King, who had, I thought it was going to be super cool because he had like a shop that sold weapons and stuff. You don't actually use the shop mechanic at all. I thought it was going to be a cool mechanic. There is another new mechanic with the Trade Network storyline. At night, there are people you can trade with. They have requests of things you can bring to them, and then they trade those items. They're very specific items, though. It's like, bring me 5 headsets, and I'll give you a shotgun. And I'm just thinking, like, why would I do that when I can just craft a shotgun at the crafting tables at my place? So I didn't really do that, except for there's one time where you have to do it for a mission. So maybe they unlock stuff that you can't get otherwise. I don't actually know, but it just felt like it was a cool idea, but they didn't really do anything with it. And the store was, again, a cool concept, but it was just a guy giving you missions. And he has a daughter, and they have conflict and all of that. And I thought that was cool, but you couldn't really do anything. Couldn't make any choices that impacted the outcome of that. So it didn't really feel like a satisfying story to me, and there wasn't a conclusion to that part of the story. So that was a bit irritating to me. So the game builds to a big rebellion against the tower, and there's a really cool mission where you infiltrate the tower, and then you get to the top, and you meet the leader of the tower. You learn what the plan is. One thing that was kind of annoying is, like, there's this mystery of the tower. Like, they're stealing these generators, and what do they need these generators for? I won't spoil it, but they reveal in the game, in an early mission in the game, one of the first couple missions, they show you what the generators are for, and then they act like it's still a mystery, like you still don't know what it's for. And it was just like, what? Like, I already knew that the generators are being used for that, and then it's supposed to be this big reveal. But then you learn Mama's plan at the end. Mama is the leader of the tower. You learn her plan, and then you have a big choice at the end, and that's the end. Overall, very good game. I love the action-oriented gameplay. In some ways, I would say I prefer this game to the original one just because of how much more intense it feels. And the new features really add a whole new dynamic. So briefly, we're going to touch on performance. I played this game on a RTX 3070 graphics card and a 12700K CPU. On my Oculus Rift S, that's a headset that you plug into your computer. So it's also available for standalone headsets. I hear the standalone headset versions have performance issues. I didn't have any performance issues whatsoever. I had one crash towards the end of the game, but other than that, I had no stuttering. It was a buttery smooth frame rate. Maybe a couple stutters here or there with some explosions, but other than that, it was like a really, really smooth experience. There were some glitches, mainly pertaining to visuals. And the visuals of the game, there were a lot of textures that were misaligned. So things would be like floating above the ground. And these things always exist in video games, so it's not going to be a complaint too much. But when you're in VR, it's so much more noticeable in VR because it's in front of you. And weirdly enough, a lot of those glitches happened in the final mission. Some of the worst ones I saw, there was like a banner on the wall in front of me, and then I would come closer to it and it would disappear. This happened in the final mission a couple times. So there were a couple other weird things that happened, like when I was talking to the Pawn King one time, I just randomly, just because I'm being goofy, I pulled out my chainsaw and started like attacking the barrier between him and me, and he just like fell backwards and like just I couldn't even see what the dialogue options were.
I'll tell you what I think of that. You ready? You ready for this? This is what I think of it. What is he doing? He's running away. No. What is going on? He just T-posed away, dude. That was hilarious. I can't even see what the options are. Bro, get over here. What? I broke the game, dude. Look at that.
So that was really funny. But most of these glitches are just amusing, humorous. The major downfall of this game is that the human enemy AI is abysmal. So a part of that is by design, I think, because if they were smarter, it'd be like a nearly impossible game. But they would see you murder somebody in front of them, and then they would be like, must have been the wind, you know, the classic video game thing. And then like they will see you, you'll hear the sound that they notice you're there, and then they will just like, they'll have their gun pointed at you, and then they'll just like, it's like retreat in the distance and then just run behind something and then come up to you and start shooting. It just like, it kind of takes you out of the immersion. So that's one small downfall. So the only thing I haven't covered yet is enemy types. And this game preserves all of the zombie enemy types from the previous game. One thing they did to add difficulty towards the end of the game was they added these new zombies. There are zombies who are sick, and if you kill them at close range, they will lower your health and add sickness to you. I think this is a good mechanic. It changes things up so you can't rely on one particular type of weapon. They also added enemies that had helmets on. So like soldiers from the tower that had these bulletproof helmets on. They made it so you basically had to kill them at close range through specific holes in their helmet, or you have to do what I did and decapitate them with a melee weapon. So I think that those in the previous game were relied on a bit too much in the end game. And while I think it is great that they have different enemy types to make it more difficult, they added too many of them towards the end. So the end game, after you beat the main story, wasn't very fun for me to play because it was like every enemy had either a helmet on or was a sick one. So this game dials that back a little bit. So they're a little bit more rare, and I think that that's for the better, and they added difficulty by adding more zombies. So I think they were a bit more limited in terms of the technical capabilities of the game in the previous one. Now we have a bit better hardware, so they can add more enemies on screen. I think it makes for a better balance. The only additional zombie enemy they added were these grenader enemies for the tower. So these guys have similar armor to Garrick, the boss battle guy that I mentioned before, and they can't be killed with guns very easily. You need explosives to kill them, and then also the zombie versions of them, you need explosives to kill them. Now, I'm not a fan of these enemies, especially when they're zombie types. I think it's a bit too hard to kill them, and it really, like, the game already had the need to carry explosives around. I don't know, I wasn't fond of these enemies. They always annoyed me when they showed up. So that's just it's a small criticism. In the previous game, they had zombies with guts exposed, and if you killed them, you stabbed them. You can use the guts to stealth your way around, using the guts trick from the classic Walking Dead comic series and TV show. And that does return in this one, but those enemies are few and far between. I only counted like 4 in my whole playthrough. So I used that once, but other than that, it's pretty rare to see them. So it does feel like it would have been more useful in this one than a previous game because of how many enemies there are, but they have less of them. Maybe that's for the better, maybe it's not. I don't know, that's up to you guys. But I ended up kind of wishing that there was a guts enemy when there wasn't sometimes. but it made for a more difficult experience, more challenging experience. So ultimately, I'm a big fan. So other than that, not really much to report as far as like glitches or anything. You know, there's still some slight jankiness around, you know, like if you turn using the thumbstick while you have a weapon in your hand, sometimes it'll collide with something and you'll hear a weird sound and then your hand will jerk back. There's weird stuff like that, but nothing game breaking, nothing that prevented me from doing what I needed to do. I had one crash, but other than that, performance was great. So on the technical side of things, I had no real issues with this, but keep in mind I'm playing on PC, so I have more hardware than a Quest headset or a PSVR 2 headset has. So keep that in mind. So the only real issue I had when it comes to controls is when I was trying to grab the flashlight. Now the flashlight is kind of in your chest area on the left side, and all the time when I was trying to grab the flashlight, it would automatically grab the weapon that I had holstered on the left side around my hip area. I think the hip area is very generous, which is convenient when you want to grab the weapon, but when I was trying to grab the flashlight, it got a little bit annoying. So that's the only real control issue that I had. Everything else pretty much operated as intended. One thing I wanted to add really quickly is that I enjoyed some of the Easter eggs in the game, like the hospital on the tower map has a door that says "Don't open dead inside," which was fun to see as a flashback to the pilot episode of the TV show, which is especially fun because this game takes place in the comic universe, not the TV show universe, but it's still fun to see an appreciation of the TV show in this game as well. One thing that did throw me off is there actually is product placement in this game, and I'm not somebody who's against product placement on principle, but it has to fit the atmosphere, and there was a poster for the show Reacher on Amazon, which is a brand new show, and it felt really weird considering the apocalypse in the Walking Dead comic universe started in 2003. It's kind of odd that there happens to be a poster from a show 20 years in the future. It just really sucked me out of it with a brand new show in an apocalypse, so that I could have done without, but it's not really worth dwelling on too much. So I want to add that I paid $10 extra for the deluxe version of this game. It's called the Payback edition, and I just want to say that it's definitely not worth the money. $10 is a big price for 2 weapon skins is pretty much what you get. You get a new version of the one-handed shotgun, the upgraded version, thankfully, and it also comes with a gold version of the 9mm pistol, which is the gun I used throughout most of the game. It's from the original game, but this is a new gold-plated version, which is pretty cool. So honestly, that skin made it more worthwhile to me. I don't begrudge paying that much for it, but if it was half the price, I would actually recommend it just because the gold-plated pistol is cool. But other than that, it did add a shelf to display your collectibles. So there are collectibles in the game, angels and demons. The angels are during the day. Each of the maps has a hidden angel. Those are imported from the original game with 3 new ones for the new maps. And then there's the demons, which show up at night. I had fun collecting these, but it's really not essential. It doesn't really add anything to the experience. You don't get anything other than an achievement for getting them all, but I enjoyed seeing them all displayed in my home base. So I thought that was cool. Another fine addition. Just the price is the only problem that I really have with it. That's pretty much my review of this game. If you guys played it, definitely let me know what you think in the comment section down below. And if you want to see more Walking Dead content or video game content, definitely hit the sub button for Shook Earth Media. And Shook Earth Gaming is where I play more games and stuff. I do live streams on this channel as well, but a lot of the spillover will go to the gaming channel. So if you're interested in my gaming content, definitely check that channel out as well. I will link it down below. Well, with that, it's been your boy Shuggy. Let me know what you guys think down below, and I hope to see you in the next video. With that, it's been your boy Shuggy. I'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks for watching.